folks? I'm Ramon of the Garbled podcast, and I am here with
Zoraida Cordova.
Yes, and what are you most famous for?
Fame. I'm most well known for the series, the Brooklyn Brujas series,
yes.
which is a young adult novel, or 3 novels about sisters who have powers. They're brujas, and they basically like fuck shit up in Brooklyn.
What was the like? Where did you draw from for the series?
For the series? Basically, I wanted to create magic that didn't exist before, but it's based on Latinidad, like Latinos. I really wanted it to be like an homage to the shows that I grew up on, like Buffy and Angel and Charmed, and make them Latinas, you know. And so the only thing that is really the most important part of the story is that their magic wouldn't exist if it didn't come from the Spanish colonization, like slavery, the indigenous people that make up Latin America, and so like how all of that would have shaped the magic that these girls in the year 2000, it's still 2012, like it's still a good year.
Okay.
You know?
Back in the Obama days.
Back in the Obama days, it's still this time period. So like, what does magic look like if we were to do it now? If like Charmed were, 3 Latina sisters instead of like 3 girls who practice like Celtic magic. And
right.
I love that stuff. Like I love Greek mythology. I love like all of those shows. But at the same time, there's no room for people of color in those shows, really. I think. And so now that was just my attempt to create it. And so I feel like if you are a writer and you don't see yourself on the shelf, you just have to write that story.
You know what? You're like the 4th person I've talked to today who has taken that approach to things, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it because too often I think people don't see themselves in things, and they complain and they write it off. But like you actually bothered to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that it helps that I'm surrounded by other creative people from different backgrounds, all kinds of backgrounds who have the same issue. So other marginalized authors, not just by race, but by like identity or gender, or it's you sort of get tired, and so you have to make room for these spaces. And if people don't want to make room for you, you just like do it anyway.
So that's been your approach?
Yeah, just like write it, and somebody will come and enjoy it, and somebody will connect with it. And I've been very fortunate that I have had people connect with the stories.
Now, when you first started off, how did you go about like getting your book into people's hands? Did you go through?
I have a publisher, and so my publisher does the legwork for the most part. Well, they don't do the legwork; they do the I do because I'm here and I go places. But I send myself on tour, and it's an investment for me. But what they do is they provide the editing process. They provide the copy edits because, like, grammar, what is it?
Right.
And they do the layouts for the manuscript. They send it out to reviewers. They can position it in places that I wouldn't be able to do it myself if I were to self-publish it. So they can send it to, like, the New York Times and places like that. And they can also allow me to go to book festivals and conventions where I can meet librarians, because I wouldn't be able to really get the distribution that I need. So what a publisher does is they give you distribution. So even if you don't like the cover that they give you, the title that they pick, or they change, they still provide a service.
Okay, so what do you think about people who like go the Amazon route and they self-publish and they maybe go to Staples and they print out 100 copies?
Right. And I think that that's a very valid choice. I think it gives you autonomy, and it gives you the creative control that most traditionally published authors don't have. Like, unless you're J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, then you really can't control the face of your book, or anything but the writing. And so self-publishing is very valid. It's not looked down upon the way it was like maybe 8 years ago. But I'm also tired of seeing people give self-publishing as like the only way that marginalized people can actually publish, because I don't think that's true anymore. Okay. So it used to be that like a couple of years ago, if like a publisher didn't want to, you know, take on a piece by a person of color, the suggestion by many creative people would be like, oh, you should self-publish your book. But I'm like, but then we're taking away the responsibility that publishers have to diversify their lists, because the argument is that if it were good enough, then it would be traditionally published. But that's also not true because of like systematic racism within the publishing industry. And so like so many doors are closed for authors, like specifically like Black authors who are writing about magic instead of pain, or like Latinos who are writing about romances instead of immigration stories. And so when you sort of like get outside of those spaces, it's harder to publish in the traditional space, and you're sort of relegated to self-publishing, and it shouldn't be that way. So like self-publishing is great, but we should also like try really hard to get traditionally published, because like we also belong in this place.
Great. No, I love that you're holding their feet to the fire on that.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, do you have a process that you follow? Like I know that some writers say to themselves, I'm going to do like 1,000 words a day, and you have some people who, you know, I'm not going to. They sequester themselves away. And
I do both. Sometimes I go away. Like I have a family that is fortunate. Like my uncle has an apartment in Puerto Rico, so he'll like let me go there for a month, and I'll just be like, I'm just gonna live in your apartment, because they don't live there. And so like I can sequester myself and like,
to a private island, to a tropical
island. And you know, that sounds really bougie, but it's like a little rinky apartment, and I could just sit there and write. But because I'm on deadline and because I have different projects, I can also sit at the table and write while an entire convention is happening around me.
Did you do writing today?
Yeah, I was just writing today. I had to finish a chapter because my deadline's on Monday, and so I still have like 4 chapters left to write, and I can do that by tomorrow. It's just I give myself a certain word count. So when I'm writing, my process is to outline the scene, and then that way it comes easier. That process has only been what I can do because I'm on deadline. If I were not on deadline, then I would take different approaches. I would write when I felt like it, or I would write when the story made sense, or I would write when I sequestered myself to like the Caribbean and like sat there and waited for like sort of inspiration to come. But there is no really right way to write. Okay.
Have you? Because I was listening. I'm sorry. I don't.
No.
If you have to go. But have you ever written down like a large amount and just decided, oh wow, this is not good, and just tossed it out and started over, or?
Yes. I wrote a whole book, and I know that it has to change like from the beginning.
Wow, a whole book.
And that's fine, because like if I look at it in 5 years and it's not the book that I wanted it to be, I'm going to regret it. And so it's like there's no real race. You know, my publisher will get mad probably, but at the end of the day, if it's a better book, then.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. And I guess that's it.
Thank you.